Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. In this episode, Italian researcher Corrado Malanga dismantles one of archaeology's most enduring assumptions, that the pyramids of Giza were built as tombs, and replaces it with something far more unsettling, that they were sophisticated sonic machines, engineered to regenerate power, channel vibrational energy, and possibly heal the human body. From the underground city detected beneath the Giza Plateau, using synthetic aperture radar, to the mystery of Rh-negative blood, the lost continent of Atlantis, and the ancient war between two civilizations fought with flying machines, Malanga connects dots that official history has kept carefully separate. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a different reading of the evidence. Malanga argues with conviction that the Great Pyramid of Giza, traditionally known as the Pyramid of Cheops or Khufu, was never a pharaoh's tomb, but rather a sophisticated machine powered by the vibration of the wind. He describes it as a square-based bell capable of polarizing sound waves in the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. According to his interpretation, this structure was capable of generating and channeling infrasonic vibrations below 30 Hz, using water as its transmission medium. The mechanism is analogous to that of Tibetan singing bowls. Filled with water and set into vibration, they produce an infrasonic sound below 20 Hz, and therefore inaudible to the human ear, which does not heal through direct listening, but through a physical vibration that travels from the floor through the feet and up through the entire body, acting on the organism at a biological level. Malanga emphasizes that this is a fundamental point, and one frequently misunderstood by those who study Tibetan singing bowls. It is not the perceived sound that heals, but the infrasonic vibration that penetrates the body by conduction. Malanga describes in detail the internal workings of the pyramidal structure within the so-called King's Chamber, which he argues has been erroneously named the Pharaoh's Chamber by Egyptological tradition. A specific vibration was generated, channeled through water to the lower levels, and brought into resonance with the body of the subject placed inside the sarcophagus. This vibration was not, in his view, a simple acoustic phenomenon, but a form of soul consciousness carrying information about immortality, capable of regenerating the pharaoh's body and curing any ailments he suffered. The pyramid, in this reading, is not the site of death, but the site of the regeneration of power. To verify these hypotheses on a scientific basis, Malanga recounts his collaboration with researcher Filippo Biondi, who had the insight of converting the photonic signal of a synthetic aperture radar, SAR, into a phononic signal, exploiting a fundamental property of sound. Phonons penetrate dense substances with great efficiency. Granite, which makes up the internal structure of the pyramid, is far more transparent to sound than air. The speed of sound in granite reaches 4,000 meters per second, compared to 432 meters per second in air. This difference made it possible, through techniques based on the Fourier transform, to obtain detailed images of the pyramid's interior and of the subsoil of the Giza Plateau. The system had already been validated through Biondi's earlier work on Mount Vesuvius, where it had been possible to reach depths of over 3,000 meters and reconstruct the volcano's internal structure. The technique had also been tested at other locations where the expected findings were already known, yielding results perfectly consistent with existing knowledge. The first scientific paper on the Giza Plateau was published in 2022 in the journal Remote Sensing. The results obtained beneath the Giza Plateau are, according to Malanga, extraordinary. Channels and structures extend to depths of 1,200 meters, along with underground chambers, dwelling spaces and passageways that run beneath the entire area. The whole plateau was once inhabited by those who built these infrastructures. This discovery demolishes, in his view, the conventional interpretation of the pyramids as simple tombs, pointing instead to the existence of a vast underground city belonging to vanished civilizations. A similar analysis was carried out beneath the Pyramid of Khafre, with equally significant results. Satellite imagery analysis further reveals that the surface temperature of the Giza Plateau shows a thermal signature entirely different from that of the surrounding areas, suggesting the presence of heat sources beneath the ground. Malanga notes that, although the region is seismically active to a degree, the available studies do not indicate the presence of volcanic sources in that specific area, leaving the origin of this thermal anomaly an open question. Malanga maintains that pyramids are not a phenomenon exclusive to Egyptian culture, but a global reality. Pyramids exist in Russia, Australia, Antarctica, South and North America, throughout Europe, including Romania and possibly Italy, where further investigation would be needed, as well as in Egypt itself. Documented pyramids exist in China. In Bosnia, in the area of Visoko, structures that Malanga considers artificial pyramids have been analyzed using radar. Radar analysis has already made it possible to detect underground structures and to identify at least one step pyramid, not the largest, but a smaller one located nearby, which appears clearly in the initial analyses carried out. The specific difficulty of this site lies in the surface vegetation. The vegetation vibrates with the wind, increasing the background noise of measurements taken beneath the ground and making data interpretation more complex. Malanga anticipates, however, that in the future it will be possible to implement dedicated software filtering to improve the quality of imaging in such environments. All the world's pyramids share one fundamental characteristic. They were built in proximity to rivers or water sources. The Egyptian pyramids stand near the Nile, or near places where the Nile once flowed, or close to major hydrographic basins. This is not coincidental. Water served for the pyramid builders the same function that electrical wiring serves for us today in conducting photons. Phonons propagate through water at approximately 1,400 meters per second, and waterways were used to channel and distribute vibrational information, the form and action, a sinusoidal wave representing a vibration, to the points of use. A monumental study, published online and still largely unknown to the general public, analyzed approximately 360 megalithic and pyramidal monuments, grouping them into 5 subsets distributed on either side of the Atlantic Ocean. The characteristic common to all is their orientation toward magnetic north. Since over the past 46,000 years, magnetic north has shifted position at least twice, as a result of cataclysmic events such as asteroid impacts which, by conservation of momentum, altered the Earth's rotational axis. It is possible to date the different groups of pyramids to distinct historical periods. This applies equally to Chinese, South American, and European pyramids. This dating is made possible by the analysis of volcanic basalt crystals. As erupted basalt cools, its crystalline molecules align themselves with the magnetic north of the time. By comparing the alignment of crystals from different eruptions, it is therefore possible to reconstruct the history of magnetic pole displacement. Through the use of rare gas isotopes, These measurements are well documented in the scientific literature. Malanga also explains the technical reason why all pyramids are oriented north-south. The terrestrial magnetic field component in the north-south direction is zero. This cancellation of the magnetic component was necessary so that the vibrational process taking place inside the pyramid could occur without interference. The water channels within the Pyramid of Cheops, for instance, are all oriented north-south, confirming this hypothesis. The fact that pyramids have a precise inclination that varies from group to group thus reflects successive shifts of the magnetic pole over the millennia. Malanga maintains that before 35,000 years ago there existed on this planet a civilization of beings with an extraordinarily advanced understanding of the physics of phonons, far beyond current human knowledge. These beings were physically distinct from modern humans. They had elongated skulls, dolichocephaly, different dentition, and a cranial structure composed of bones differing in number and morphology. Malanga explicitly clarifies that he does not wish to claim that aliens built the pyramids in the simplistic sense that some would attribute to him, but rather to propose a scientifically grounded interpretation that differs from the mainstream popular narrative. The point of contact with contemporary biology is the Rh blood factor. The ancient Egyptians traced the beginning of time, the Zep Tepi, to approximately 36,500 years ago. Remarkably, modern biology places the emergence of the Rh-negative blood factor in human populations at roughly the same period. The matter remains scientifically unresolved. A biological variation at the DNA level of this magnitude would normally require hundreds of millions of years to establish itself. Yet the Rh-negative factor appears to have emerged simultaneously in different parts of the world, without deriving from the rhesus macaque. Biologists themselves acknowledge that this anomaly has no satisfactory explanation within the framework of standard evolutionary theory. The two possible hypotheses, according to Malanga, are a second independent act of creation, a hypothesis opposed by the Catholic Church, which has historically intervened whenever science has drawn close to this conclusion, having imposed the doctrine of a single creation as early as the mid-19th century, or the extraterrestrial origin of Rh-negative individuals. There is, in his view, no logically consistent third hypothesis. Malanga then examines the relationship between extraterrestrial beings and human DNA. Beings lacking a soul component, the intuitive and spiritual element that attaches itself biologically to human DNA through the purine and pyrimidine bases of the double helix, which functions as a genuine antenna, would have attempted to modify their own DNA to make it compatible with the presence of a soul by interbreeding with Rh-positive humans. This information emerges systematically, he states, across hundreds of thousands of deep hypnosis sessions, in which the soul component reports being unable to enter certain bodies because the DNA is not suitable. The outcome of this hybridization attempt was, however, the opposite of what had been intended. Human genetic heritage proved the stronger, progressively absorbing the dolichocephalic lineage, which has effectively disappeared. As Malanga observes with a degree of irony, this outcome was foreseeable in light of the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy always tends to increase, and the human race has proved the most adaptable and resilient. Entropy, Malanga specifies, cannot be reduced or lowered by technology. It may be kept locally low, but globally it always increases. It is at the same time a measure of information. Since Boltzmann's law on thermodynamic entropy and Shannon's law on information are mathematically equivalent, and therefore, indirectly, a measure of consciousness. Malanga addresses the question of ABO blood groups in relation to the origins of different populations. While acknowledging that no certainties exist regarding the origin of the various groups, which may have been shaped by minor evolutionary variations, diet, or interbreeding between races, he notes that blood group O is considered the most ancient. It has the distinctive property of being able to donate blood to all other groups, while being able to receive blood only from group O. By way of comparison, Malanga points out that horses have as many as 20 different blood groups, against the 4 or 5 of the human species. In esoteric tradition, group ORH-negative blood has historically been identified as the blood of the gods. This belief was strongly present within the Nazi movement, which had a pronounced esoteric component. Malanga recounts that Hitler, interviewed by a writer who recorded his words in a book, reportedly confessed to having seen and met beings belonging to a non-terrestrial master race. Individuals approximately 2.5 meters tall, blonde, wearing a medallion bearing the hexagram, the six-pointed star. Malanga clarifies that this symbol should not be confused with the 12 five-pointed stars of the tribes of Israel. The hexagram is the symbol of the 13th tribe, the Ashkenazi one. He does not fail to note that the same symbol is associated with Netanyahu, drawing a connection to the Masonic lodges which, in his view, link prominent political figures of the contemporary scene. Malanga proposes a radical reinterpretation of ancient history, weaving together mythology, linguistics, and paleoanthropology. Before 35,000 years ago, all the civilizations present on the planet shared a single common language, Proto-Sanskrit, the language of the Aslan and the Hurrian. Sanskrit itself, which Malanga compares to a programming language, in which each word is a set of contextual instructions capable of describing the same object from multiple angles, would preserve the traces of this primordial origin. The word Vimana, for instance, means in Sanskrit a room in which human beings are contained, describing simultaneously both the structure and its occupants. In Indian mythology, two great civilizations stand in opposition. The Aryans, the perfect sky-born beings, identified with the true Tamils, not with the populations of the Indus Valley, and the Aslan, that is, the Atlanteans. The term Aslan means the territory where those who come from the sky dwell, and Aslan is the Atlantis of myth. The ancient Indian epic texts describe a war fought with flying machines, the Vimana of the Aryans and the Ashvin of the Atlanteans, used for transport, warfare, and recreation alike. Malanga places Atlantis in Antarctica, arguing that it is the only place on the planet that cannot be freely explored, and which therefore cannot yet be ruled out as the seat of a submerged civilization. The Aslan Atlanteans, fleeing a continent rendered uninhabitable by a geophysical catastrophe, most likely a shift in the Earth's rotational axis caused by the impact of a celestial body, which brought ice to cover that region, would have colonized the entire world, building pyramids wherever they settled. The sole exception is India, where the Aryans did not welcome them. This is documented in ancient Indian texts. The populations of the Indus Valley who built the civilizations of Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and the other 8 cities of that territory were in reality Aslan, who had come from China, where the Chinese had already built their own pyramids, and not the true Aryans. The Tamils, regarded as the true Aryans, state explicitly that the latter came from China. The presence of a river at the heart of every great ancient civilization, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus, the Nile, and equally so in the civilizations of Latin America, always reflects the same functional pattern: water as the vector of information and of civilization. In support of this unified vision of ancient knowledge, Malanga recalls that the Pythagorean theorem was known simultaneously in Egypt, China, India, and among the peoples of Mesopotamia long before Pythagoras, who spent 15 years in Egypt, gave it formal expression. This, he argues, is no coincidence, but proof of the existence of a mother civilization that disseminated a common body of technical knowledge among the populations it held in subjection, without, however, sharing its mathematical proofs. That civilization required nothing more than a workforce to build its infrastructures. Its members were noble, wealthy, and learned, and did not dirty their hands. In the cosmological framework outlined by Malanga, consciousness occupies a central position. It is not a product of matter, but the fundamental reality of the universe, what was once called God. Consciousness is infinite and all-encompassing, but in its original condition it lacked one essential experience: duality. Knowing neither separation, nor beginning and end, nor death and birth, consciousness created the universe as a container in which to immerse itself in fragments, living that experience through individual beings. Every human being is a fragment of consciousness undergoing the experience of separation in order to understand what universal consciousness does not know. Death, in this framework, is not an end but the most intense experience of separation, the final frontier to be crossed in order to return to an awareness of one's immortal nature. The fear of death is resistance to this understanding. Awareness, understood as the measure of how much each fragment of consciousness comprehends itself, is proportional to the information at its disposal. Since Boltzmann's law on thermodynamic entropy and Shannon's law on information are mathematically identical, entropy and information are one and the same thing, and entropy is therefore a measure of consciousness. Consciousness itself, however, cannot be measured directly, as it is by definition infinite. In this context, the fundamental distinction between human beings and extraterrestrial entities comes into focus. The latter possess a spiritual component, reason, formal logical thought, the capacity to express and formulate, and a mental component, but are entirely lacking in the soul component, which is the seat of intuition and of the vital principle that attaches itself to biological DNA. It is the soul component that makes possible the comprehension of death as an illusion. Extraterrestrial entities, lacking this component, cannot access such understanding and are obsessed with immortality. In their attempt to appropriate the human soul component, as described in the metaphor of the picture of Dorian Gray, in which the devil steals a soul, these entities achieve only a temporary result. They succeed in drawing on the soul component, but are then forced to return it, as they possess no vessel capable of containing it. Were it otherwise, observes Malanga, humanity would already be extinct. The same pattern recurs in every mythology in the world. When a god falls in love with a human being, that god must renounce immortality, descend to earth, and accept death. Only through this choice does the god become human, and only by becoming human can the god attain awareness. It is therefore human beings who teach the gods what it means to be alive, not the other way around. The gods possess technology, humans possess the soul. Malanga addresses the problem of the construction chronology of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. Egyptological tradition holds that the pyramids of Cheops, Khafre, and Menkaure were built in that order, reflecting the genealogical succession of the pharaohs. Malanga contests this interpretation, observing that the pyramid of Menkaure, the last according to tradition, is the smallest, the most imperfect, and the one presenting the greatest structural problems. The opposite would be expected if it represented the product of a progressive technical evolution. An Egyptologist, Malanga notes, has pointed out that the translation of the hieroglyphics shows the pyramids in chronological order following an alternating pattern. A very ancient pyramid in perfect condition, the next one totally destroyed, the following one well preserved, then another destroyed. Chronologically, this pattern is irreconcilable with the official narrative. Malanga proposes that the Pyramid of Cheops is in fact the most recent and most technologically advanced, the simplest and most functional, the result of centuries of refinement. The three pyramids of the Giza Plateau were most likely the last to be built above ground, while beneath them lay a far more complex and articulated installation. Just as a car manufacturer does not produce the same model for 20,000 years, pyramidal design evolved over time, from 36,500 BC to 13,500 BC, across a span of approximately 20,000 years. The three pyramids were originally clad in smooth, polished limestone casing stones that rendered their surfaces perfectly flat and reflective. This outer cladding was largely lost as a result of earthquakes, one of which, in the early 14th century, reduced Cairo to ruin, after which the stones were reused in the reconstruction of the city. Among the structures built with this material is the Great Mosque of Cairo, erected using blocks from the Pyramid of Cheops. The loss of the cladding irreversibly altered the original vibrational properties of the structure. Around 13,500 years ago, when the pyramids were already no longer in use, the Great Flood occurred, caused, according to Malanga, by the fall of a small moon that had been in orbit around the Earth. This event raised sea levels by 100 meters, allowing seawater to penetrate the interior of the pyramids. The evidence is still visible. On the internal walls of the Pyramid of Cheops, marine salt crystals can still be found, a fact that Malanga considers irrefutable. The approximately 100 wells on the plateau filled with mud, some, however, are found today to have been cleared, a circumstance that Malanga interprets as proof that someone has already entered them clandestinely, without making the discovery public. Malanga is convinced that the Egyptian authorities have already explored the secret chambers. He cites the case of Zahi Hawass, former superintendent of all Egyptological research, for whose visit to the secret chambers of the Pyramid of Cheops tangible evidence is said to exist. Significant, in his view, is the fact that upon retiring, Hawass publicly thanked, in the Cairo newspaper, among his collaborators, the American CIA. The reason for the lack of official public access to these sites is, according to Malanga, religious and political in nature. To allow public exploration of those structures would demolish the idea that the pyramids are tombs, and with it the entire symbolic architecture upon which the Catholic religion rests, born of the Jewish religion, itself born of the Egyptian religion, itself born of a tradition from still further back. The thought of Corrado Malanga outlines a portrait radically at odds with official history. The pyramids as sonic machines for the regeneration of power, a technologically advanced and vanished civilization that left traces across the entire planet in the form of pyramidal structures oriented to magnetic north, a humanity that carries in its blood the imprint of cosmic origins, and a universal consciousness of which every human being is a precious fragment, bearer of an experience that no god or extraterrestrial entity possesses, the awareness of separation and, through it, of one's own immortal nature. It is human beings, Malanga concludes, who are the true teachers of the universe, not because they possess technology, but because they possess a soul. That's all for today. See you in the next episode of Saturday Classics, here on Compelling Topics.